Welcome to the Ryan Casey podcast, A Journey Within. Today, we're diving into the remarkable journey of Colby Olin, a retired U.S. military serviceman who bravely deployed to Afghanistan. But his story doesn't end there. Join us as we explore the challenges he faced not only in combat, but returning to civilian life, ultimately leading him to embrace a life of sobriety. Get ready for an inspiring tale of resilience and transformation. This is Colby Olin, and this is his journey. Colby, tell me about the day that you enlisted.
The day I enlisted, it was late summer 2011. It was actually after my first year of college. I went to Western New England College, which is now Western New England University, for lacrosse. Had a rough go. Started out, just kind of ruined the sport for me. And then I joined ROTC my second semester. I had a 1.34 GPA after graduating high school with honors. So it's doing dad proud. But so I did ROTC. It got me back on track. I switched my major from business administration to criminal justice with a specification in terrorist and homeland security. Got to do the Boston Marathon in 2010 or 2011 with the Ruck team, which was a really great experience. But then I figured, because my grandfather was an officer in the Army, that I wanted to be enlisted first to know what it was like to be enlisted. And
so did you always was it always kind of like something you planned on doing, or like, let's say like if lacrosse worked out a little bit differently or things went a little bit, was it something that might have not happened?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've pondered that myself. Like, what if I had gone for hockey and I'd done that PG year at Lawrenceville Prep like my dad tried to push me to do, instead of just saying, hey, I want out of here and out of high school and just, jumping the gun at the first school that would look at me for lacrosse. However, I feel that at some point in my life, I would have ended up in the military one way or another, mainly because I had, you know how movies go and they glorify, they romanticize, but I wanted to be like my grandfathers, and I wanted to be, I wanted to wear the uniform. And one of the first movies I ever saw was We Were Soldiers. And it was the first Cav patch, Air Mobile. So that's Gary Owen 1-7, Colonel Hal Moore, and Command Sergeant Major Plumley. So I wanted to wear that patch, and I did wear that patch.
So what did that patch mean? Like what? So it's like you look at Pat Tillman, right? And there's other people in these situations where it's like there's something that takes away. Now, we're saying like it kind of opened, your journey kind of brought you to that point. But also there was something in you that needed that patch. What did that patch represent to you? Because it made a lasting impression.
That patch represented to me that I was part of something that exceeded the athletic camaraderie, and it had a purpose. Regardless of your political or religious views when you were in the military, for me, myself, it was for the guy on the left and the right. I was part of a very specific community in the Army, which is combat arms, that raised our hands and said, I'm here, send me. So I took a lot of pride in that. And seeing, the Battle of the Ladrang Valley and doing my history reading on that just, in my own free time, seeing the movie, watching documentaries based off of Colonel Hal Moore, it just, it sent me through a loop that I got stationed at Fort Hood. And now it's Fort Cavazos or something, but it's always going to be the Hood to me.
Yeah.
So, the experience itself was completely different than what I was expecting. There was a lot of ups and downs, and obviously my military career didn't end up where I wanted it to be. I was nothing elite. I'll put that right out there. I was nothing special in my mind. I was not 75th Ranger Bat. I was not Special Forces. I was not Deltas. I was a 19 Delta. It's Cavalry Scout. We were reconnaissance. So as I like to relate it to people that don't really know military terminology that well, By definition, we are the eyes and the ears of the commander on the battlefield. The most dangerous weapon a scout has is his radio. However, we need to know how to fight our way out of a certain situation. They actually called us the jack of all trades. And we have a specific, there's a song for it, but it's a poem called The Fiddler's Green. And then they had, the jack of all trades, which was something that they made us memorize in one station unit training, which for combat arms, infantry, cavalry, scouts, and tankers all go to. When you are enlisted in any other job in the Army, you go to your basic training with different MOSs, military occupational specialties, and then you go to a different place for your advanced individual training.
Right.
For us, it was all one thing. Same people that you hated every day, all day, getting, smoked by your drill sergeants and watching stupid stuff happen. I was 19. So
Yeah, so you were 19 years old, and, my grandfather, I was always told the story, and he told me, I was fortunate enough for him to tell me he was in a movie theater when, Pearl Harbor was attacked. Then basically, I don't know if it was during the movie, after the movie, whenever, got up, left, signed, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So for you, when you decide, okay, this is not going to work, I'm going to enlist, it was a pretty simple decision.
For me, it was.
There was nothing that was saying to you, let me rethink this. Should I go in this right? Or is this now? Here it is. And
yeah, it was really, my dad will say it till he's blue in the face that he was all 100%, behind me on it. But he did, at one point he admitted, he was like, I was hard on you about it because, number one, you didn't want to finish college. And, back then that was the norm. You go to college, get a degree, you get a good job, and you do that for the rest of your life, But he even said, I just wanted you to stick it out in ROTC, and become an officer. I think you would have been a great officer. I said, I think I would have been a great officer too, but that's not the way that I wanted to do it. And that's why, convincing him that this was a good idea for me was hard because in his head, I'm still his kid. I'm the firstborn. I'm 18, going on 19, but I'm still, his son.
so you still felt like you had to have that conversation, almost like, I don't want to say a blessing, but like I said, if your grandfather was there and there, I'm sure you showed some interest, he must know it was coming, or do you still feel like it was kind of like you really had to prep yourself to make that? Because this is like...
To say that they were surprised would be a stretch. However, kind of taken aback a little bit. Yeah, it was not more of a blessing or convincing as much as it was me trying to get them to accept that I was going. Because I had already made the decision in my head. So when I enlisted in 2011, I didn't actually leave for one station unit training until February 27th of 2012, because I was put on what's called the delayed entry program. Now, cavalry scouts only make up 1% of the Army. So very few and far between. And at that point, they were actually, originally, cavalry scouts were at Fort Knox. All right, so they went through all their training at Fort Knox. I was only the second iteration through at Fort Benning, Georgia in Harmony Church. So I was with 181 Armor, but usually the cavalry scouts went to 515 Cav. But I was over, we were all over in Harmony Church. I was with 181, India Troop 181. I'll never forget that. And 3rd Platoon, 3rd Herd. Yeah. I made the decision and I was going to go. Okay. So it was 18 weeks, 18 and a half weeks.
So tell me a little about that. So you signed. What's the first thing you do? You see the movies, they get the hair buzz. Is that what's going on? Is that just...
So I'll tell you from a point of when I left for basic, just because in between when I enlisted and when I left, it's not like you're doing anything that's got to do with the military. I would go once a week and do PT with them, do their little marches or whatever. I mean, my recruiter got me real good, dude. I got a 92 on the ASVAB out of 99. I had a 125 GT score. So I could have done a lot of different things, but in my mind, I was like, I want to fight. Mm-hmm. And that's just what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And my goal at that point, I wanted to be a door gunner. That was in my head. I was like, I'm going to be air cav.
Explain what that is.
A door gunner is a mounted gunner on the side of a helicopter. Mm. So if you see a Black Hawk go up and you see those two guns pointing out the side, somebody's on each one of those guns. Mm-hmm. You would call in a Black Hawk for, or an Apache. An Apache is specifically a gunship. Like, you don't have any passengers on that. You have your pilot and your weapons operator. But for me, I wanted to be a gunner on a Black Hawk. You see, we were soldiers. You see all these Vietnam movies. You see those guys going up in the Hueys on the M60s, which were on the doors. Now they have, they got miniguns. You got your 50s. You're pretty stacked. But then you have your personnel carriers. You have your medevac birds. But I wanted to be air cav. I wanted to be, in the air, on the door, on the gun, on a crew. And my recruiter, who looked like Farva from Super Troopers, mustache and all his infinite wisdom was, for them, they're the salesmen of the military. That's what they do. If you're a recruiter, there's actually a school you go to be a recruiter. And you gotta sell these kids on enlisting.
Let me ask you this. I do real estate for a living. I don't think if I went to, when I was a kid, and they say, hey, I want to be a realtor, I guarantee you, like, oh, what do you want to be when you get older? You never hear anyone say a realtor, right? Someone becomes a recruiter.
Yeah.
It's just more of people want to wouldn't they rather be, that's the.
Yeah, there's some, they need to make numbers every month, just like any sales job does. If you go to at my dealership, you have an expected goal for your fast start. A lot of dealerships, you have a fast start, and then you have a goal that you have to hit by the end of the month for enlistment numbers. Just like when you're in the military, you have a retention person that, they go and they do re-enlistment paperwork. They try to help retain military personnel in the military. That's what retention does. People enlist in the military based off their own volitions for their own reasons. I've met guys that go in with 4 kids and they're 18, 19 years old from like Idaho, because that's just, what they do out there. They wait till they're 18, they get married, they pop out 4 kids before they're, they pop out 2 kids before they're 19 or 20, and they end up joining the military because they can't pay for the kids. Right. And they need the benefits. Right. I've met guys from, inner cities in DC, in LA. I had this one cat, he always thought, I'm not going to say his name, but, he always thought he was a hard up. Those guys are hard asses. They think they are. I'm the I'd hit a drill sergeant if he got in my face kind of guy. Right. The first ones to cry. It's hysterical. Right.
Tell me about that. What's that? So you got on, just to kind of back up a little bit more, you got on a bus. So your day, tell me about that day. Like the day I left, I went to the recruiting station with my mom. She dropped me off. They had a guy there that had me jump in the car with him, and he drove me to MEPS, basically. Which How are you feeling at this point? Like, do you feel good? You nervous? You sad? Like, what's
I'm
going
nervous,
through?
man. Yeah. I'm nervous and excited. You're feeling all those different emotions. Like, wow, I actually just, enlisted, swore in, did all this, and I'm about to go to basic training.
Did you? So, like, if you're in that car and you're with this guy now, everything that you thought it was going to be, before we kind of get into what it was like, were you right about it? Like, we always kind of put an image in our head, like, this is like, maybe sometimes we make it worse. We try to make it better.
I didn't know what to expect out of basic.
Okay.
Basically. When my boots hit the ground during the shark attack, I didn't know what
What's
was
a shark attack?
So they don't call it the shark attack anymore. They actually call it the first 100 yards.
Okay.
Which is, I'm not even going to get into that. But, you're breaking tradition on that one. But for infantry and scouts, you had the shark attack a lot of times, a very intense shark attack. That means that, and excuse my language, but this is what the drill sergeant said when he got on my bus, because you go to first is reception. Reception is when you get there with your civilian clothes, they shave your heads, and they do that. It's just like the movie. You walk in and you sit down, you're standing at attention in your civilian clothes, whatever you wore when you got there, and they sit you down with these barbers and they shave your head. You got these kids coming out. One had a mole on his head he didn't know about. He's bleeding on the side. Like, yeah. So, but they've been doing this for 30 years. It's a rite of passage. For men, you get your head shaved. and that's a males only thing. But you get your head shaved when you go. You get your ID picture done and, you know, whatever, but you get your cat card. But then you go to reception. That's where you get all your gear. So they size you for your boots. They size you for your uniforms that you're going to be wearing. They give you, they issue you a certain amount of tan t-shirts, a certain amount of underwear, we call them the tanny tighties because they're whitey tighties with tan. Then a certain amount of green socks. They give you the same amount, you know, for everybody.
And how quickly is this happening? Is it like
it goes pretty quickly, unless, you know, once you were going to get sized, that could take a while because you're trying, you know, you're getting through like hundreds of people at that point. But I mean, no, it wasn't too bad for us, mainly because, I mean, with the way that scouts work and how it's the 1%, like I said before, there's only 1% of them, you know, that are in the military, in the Army. I had to wait that long because there weren't any spots open to go to, because of their transition from Knox to Benning, and there were no more slots open in that transition time. So, you know, it wasn't horrible, but, you know, we were in reception for about 4 or 5 days. You know, get to know some of the guys that you're going to be in, you know, basically, you know, basic next, you know, 18 weeks with.
How do you, so, okay, you're in like the situation where you're going to meet these people that you're going to go through basic, you're going to go through a lot of struggles. How did you approach it? Are you going to be like, you know, you talked about the hardo, I'm going to be the confident guy, I'm going to just be quiet and keep to myself. Like what was your mentality, and was it the right one, and how would you change it?
So I went in there, you know,
how do you go in? Like, I'm not saying not yourself. I just feel like you have to go in as someone else, right? You kind of have to go in as if,
I went in there, you know, as me, but I also wanted to go in and try to make friends with everybody that was there, because I understood that, like, you know, hey, we were going to be going through something that is an extremely different and difficult transition in your life. It's the start of a new thing for a lot of us, and it's not just like starting a new career choice. Like, you are committing yourself to just this amount of training before you even get sent to your unit. So, I mean, at that point, I'm thinking to myself, you know, oh, it's, you know, basic, and I was nervous, didn't know what to expect. I was trying to make friends with people.
And you're also,
I think I was a little bit too lighthearted. I think I should have taken it a little bit more seriously.
right. But I'll tell you this, because like, I'm listening to your story. I'm always kind of like putting myself in the position, and I'm like, I'm getting on this bus, and they're going to, basically, I'm going to be trained to kill. My job is to, I mean, you do have other jobs, but basically you're going to have a gun, and you could be in the situation where you are killing people, right? And there's going to be tough to have that. Well, I'm going to try to make some friends too while I'm there, because my mindset would be like, I'm here to do one job, not to get the emotions. But then also, I think that's a horrible way to approach it too, because then you become numb, right? Like, you know, so I was just curious, that balance. I read something recently. It's like, there's time for peace and there's time for war, right? Like, you're talking about, all this in between. It's like, when you're actually in it,
you'd rather be a warrior and a gardener in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
but how do you, I guess I would say, is there a balance, or do you think it should favor one side?
To each their own. I mean, it depends on the person. And in retrospect, looking back at it, I mean, most of everybody, we had a 17-year-old kid that went through with us because he turned 18 in basic. I mean, we are teenagers that are being trained to kill. And that is, you know, you think of it as surreal. Some people, like, I was never a big video game guy. So I didn't go off of Call of Duty or anything like that. Some people, they go in thinking, oh, I'm good at Call of Duty. You know, I can do this too. You know, no, it's a completely different animal. Or I'm good at airsoft or paintball. I can do this. You know, completely different animal. So, you know, it's hard to say whether there is a balance or not. It's hard to say whether a teenager can really mentally attune themselves into the respect of what they're about to do, what they're about to go and venture into. When your boots hit the ground, and because you get bussed from reception over to your troop, when your boots hit the ground, that's when the reality kicks in. Because that's when your drill sergeant Poison, badass dude, one of only a few tankers that had a Ranger tab at that point. He gets on the bus, and I'll never forget this guy. Stands up, that big brown round, standing there. Gentlemen, welcome to Harmony Church. Get the fuck off my bus. And just next thing you know, we're all just, running, move. It's made to fail situation at all times. The reason they do a make to fail situational awareness is because they need you to know that you are not in control anymore. They are. That is the point. They need you to understand and know what it's like to be in situations where you don't have control over that, and they need to see how you react to that. It is a very, very different mental game that they do. When you go to the Drill Sergeant Academy, I've got buddies that went through it. Our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Vaughn, when he got to us in my unit straight from the trail. We were his first platoon outside of being a drill sergeant, right? So, these guys, they go through a very specific and, grueling school.
Taking away that control, is that how you gain respect?
It's a breaking down aspect. It's not a way of gaining respect, because in the military, you always respect the rank. You don't have to respect the man behind the rank, but you got to respect the rank that's on the chest. That's the way that, I always rolled. Just because you wear that rank doesn't mean that I respect the person wearing the uniform. However, they do these made to fail situations. They overexert you, they beat you down, they break you down to start from a new foundation.
What they taught you that day or those couple weeks still applies now. Do you learn you don't have control? Is it, people say, hey, you can only worry about the things that you can control.
I would say not as heavily as people would think.
Okay.
Those first initial 2 weeks, it's a shock. It's a culture shock. That's what it's meant to do. So I wouldn't say anything from those first 2 weeks.
Because I guess you can say, when you always think of someone that's been in the military is not there anymore, he's waking up exactly at this time, he's making his bed, everything is already good to go, organized. I know it's not always the case, but does that do you ever feel that where it's hey, you had to be up at a certain time, it makes it easier for you to commit to it because
I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
If I find something that interests me to a point of 100% commitment, because I've done that stuff before, yes, it is easier for me to be able to commit, to be able to be staunchly on time, wake up at a certain time, be able to execute these certain things during the day in order for me to do it and not fall off. Like with not drinking anymore. That's something that I can honestly say I can attribute to that, because it's, a lot of people struggle with it. Luckily, I don't, anymore. I did for a long time. But, for me to be able to just shut that switch off and, be able to do what I'm doing now with no regrets, that's one thing that I can attribute to that. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize is once you get out of, one station unit training and you get to your unit, it is no lie. When I got to my unit, it said the same thing to me. It's remember everything you learned in basic? Roger. Yeah. Forget all of it. So we're okay, because, that's what it is. It's basic training.
So tell me, what did you learn from basic training? What was the biggest struggle?
I would say for me, not getting overly emotional was really a hard challenge for me, because up to that point, I didn't really have a good handle on my emotions. I could go from happy real quick to angry real quick, or I could go from angry real quick to happy real quick. I wasn't bipolar. It was just hard for me to, regulate, those hormones. You're a teenager. You still have those hormones running around in you, man. It's what else are you going to expect? But I would say that it was a challenge. The most challenging part of that was the actual process of doing tasks that were just in such, they were in high demand of resiliency. Now, I have always been a resilient guy. I was a resilient kid. I was a resilient athlete. I was a tough kid. After, I hit my growth spurt in middle school, that's when I started to gain some toughness through hockey and lacrosse and really come out of my shell. But never before had I low crawled with full kit in 100 degrees in the middle of Georgia in the summer in a gravel pit for hours, you know,
Right.
and you have no control. You can't just get up and walk away, you know.
Right.
At
Yeah.
that point, I don't know what they have, you know, because now they have like stress cards and all this weird stuff. So I don't know what's going on, but you know, I'll give you an example where we had a day which was almost a black flag. Black flag is it's too hot, you guys can't do anything. We don't want anybody having a heat stroke. So you know, it's supposed to keep you inside. CO comes out, and you know, next thing you know, we're out in the gravel pit, and it's basically it's a big box, massive box full of gravel. Sand Hill, where the infantry goes at Benning, those guys they have sand pits. We have gravel pits, and we ended up doing low crawls from one end of the pit to the other, one end to the other. I only had to do it 3 times, and then they made me stop and pull, you know, security. Then they were taking, you know, the guys that were taking a little bit longer, maybe they were sucking because of the heat, and you know, you can't breathe because you have all that dust coming up in your face, and you know, later on in my military, you know, time in the military, it you know, I brushed that off, but it's initially seeing that the first time and going through it the first time, you know, I was, you know, you think you're gonna die, you've never been through it before, and then you go through a lot worse, and you're like, oh, that was nothing, but you know, my buddy Matt, you know, he's now a nationally accredited canine handler. He was my bunkmate, and we went through, and he still tells the story. He's like, you saved my butt, and because I just reacted to what happened. What happened was we went back up after, you know, this, you know, hellish, you know, low crawl session. And I looked over, and he was starting to, you know, shake, and then his hands locked up and went like that. And I was like, he's having a seizure. So on the front of your body armor, you have a loop. You pull that loop, and it's an emergency, you know, pull where it just drops all of your gear and takes it all apart, right? So you grab that, you rip it, instead of having to take everything else off, it just falls off. It's a rip cord. And I took them, stripped them down, and threw them in the shower with the cold water on while the drill sergeants were like trying to figure out, you know, what to do. The drill sergeant walked in, and then I'm standing there with my hand on his back trying to keep him up. He's standing there in his tanny tighties doing a heat dump, which is you turn the cold water on. They made us do it every day to cool down our bodies. And he's still like seizing a little bit, and I'm just making sure that he doesn't fall on his face. But, you know, nothing was ever reported, because if it was reported, then the drill sergeant would get in trouble, and there'd be an investigation. And it's like, you know, it's supposed to suck, but it's not supposed to suck so bad that you send this kid into, you know, a heat stroke.
Basic training, I'm guessing it's not like a free, you know, you get a 7-day trial at Planet Fitness, right? Or is it? Can someone say in the first 10 days, like, I can't do this mentally or physically? Is it that easy to say to get out?
Yeah. I mean, you can. It's a lot of paperwork that goes with it, but, you know, you're still in basic.
But out of 100 people that go into basic, how many would you say drop out?
Surprisingly, everybody made it through except for one person, and that's because he broke his leg and he got washed out and had to recycle back once his leg was healed, and he could go through it again.
Right. Okay.
So you had, you know, 30-ish guys per platoon, 4 platoons per troop, and we had about 120 people in our troop.
Okay. No, success isn't just when things are going great, right? Success is when things are tough too. And that's when you can become even greater.
They were at a breaking point. I mean, a lot of people hit their breaking points, you know, mentally, emotionally, physically. You know, everybody's supposed to hit a breaking point. That's what it's meant to do. That's why it's, you know, one station unit training is basic and AIT together. So after your first 9 weeks of basic training, you graduate basic training, you get what's called Family Day. You go on that, and then you go to AIT. AIT is your job training. So we learn scout skills, night operations, you know, 50 cal, 240, 249. You know, we got more in depth with that. Mark 19. Mark 19 is a basic terminology. It's a machine gun to grenade launcher. That's what Mark 19 is. So that's a scout weapon, infantry weapon. But yeah, so we went through different operations. We got into the kind of the meat and potatoes of what our job was. And then you go when you graduate one station unit training, you know, big parades and everything. And about a week before, because you have different phases have colors. Initial phase is red phase, then you have white phase, and then you have blue phase. That's your first 9 weeks of basic. Then you have black phase, which is your heart, meat, and potatoes, your job training. And the drill sergeants kind of ease off a little bit. And then your cadre, which are your teachers, basically, train you on how to, throw grenades, bound and throw grenades, do C4 explosive, stuff like that.
Because feel like after a while, some people don't perform good under pressure, right? And it's like your confidence can start to break. When you don't have confidence, you're second guessing, and then you're making more mistakes. So is it, so when you're training, is there some time where it's kind of like, okay, well, this was wrong, but we're going to get you there? Or is it constantly that high intensity? Like, does it ever kind of slow down a little bit where you can kind of catch a breath?
Well, I mean, for us at least, when they were teaching us how to do our jobs, it slowed down for a classroom environment so that we could actually retain the information that we were getting and we could learn the job that we were doing.
Right.
I mean, that didn't take away from when we were not with our cadre. We were getting fucked up by our drill sergeants. But, we used to have smoke sessions, which meant that our drill sergeants would pit our platoons against each other and smoke the dog piss out of us until only one was standing.
What do you mean smoke? What does that mean?
That means just do heavy physical training, push-ups, sit-ups, flutter kicks, just constantly over and over and over again for hours. They just make you do different exercises for hours until basically you were cramping up and then passing out, and then they'd make you do more.
Let me ask you this.
What's up?
Do you feel like that if that was... Is that the mindset that you had or most people had where it's like, after he did 10 push-ups, like you were still like had a smile on your face? Or did you want to be the kind of guy like, oh, no, you, Cool Hand Luke, great movie. Ever see the movie Cool Hand Luke?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that scene where they finally, they think they break him and they tell him to start digging a hole. And then he comes over, the warden says, oh, what are you doing? I told you to dig the hole over here. Fill that one up and dig this one. And then he comes back and he keeps going. And he finally breaks him. Right? But a couple scenes before, when they're paving, they're doing the road, they're doing the asphalt, they're all like, oh, it's so hot today. And they're all sweating. And all of a sudden, this Paul Newman, he's digging faster. And they're like, whoa, take it easy. It's hot. He's like, he goes, if the man wants us to move fast, let's give it to the man. Right? And then all of a sudden, they're all starting to go and they can't get out. And they're all looking like, the warden and all the cops. And they're looking around and like, what's going on? They're looking. And it's that mentality. And he won that day. Is that how you would how would you approach it with Paul Newman in the road? Like, let's finish this road, or just digging that hole and finally just saying you're there?
If you're doing it with a group of guys, you're pushing through. I mean, we when they did that, and I remember it was our drill sergeant, Drill Sergeant Kofelt. He was the senior drill sergeant when I first got there. Then he went to airborne school and came back, and then finished out because that was his last cycle. But, this guy, he would come in, and he didn't care. It was his last cycle. So he pit us in what he called a smoke-off against the 4th Platoon to see who would last longer. And this went on for hours, man. And we were just all sweating. The floor was soaking wet. It was just because they closed the doors so nobody could see. Just, it was hot, just rolling around in our own sweat. And it got to a certain point where he just lined all of us up in the middle facing the person from the opposite platoon and had us in the push-up position and just said, stay there. And they timed us to see how long everyone would last. And it was Torres from our platoon that lasted all the way until the end. No, Torres was from 4th Platoon. He dropped. It was Phillips from our platoon that stayed up the whole time. And we were all like, yeah, dude. We were all just, oh, God, just almost like when you win a championship and everybody's just, you're bleeding, you're broken, you're tired, but you made that goal in overtime. That's how we felt.
Right.
So there are situations like that. You build a camaraderie. It helps you push each other through these things. That's also what it's meant to do, is to help you learn in these made-to-fail situations that you can rely on your brother to help you get through that. Because if you can't trust anybody else in the world, you know what you can trust? You know who you can trust? That guy sitting next to you. That's the whole point of it. And then they bring you, you're bright and bushy-tailed, and you go to your unit, and the next thing you know, you're just like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Because, I ended up with 4th Squadron 9th Cav Regiment, and I recently, last year, found out that they disbanded. I don't know why. I don't know how. Can I say I'm not surprised? Can't say I'm not surprised. But, there were a lot of things, man. I had some of the best and worst times of my life with my guys. I mean, for my wedding next month, I've got more than half of my groomsmen are all my dudes from my platoon.
Awesome.
And the guy that's officiating is actually one of the guys from my platoon too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he was my dismounts on a couple missions.
So tell me about how you found out you were heading to Afghanistan, the day, how it went down.
So, we got orders and they brought the squadron together.
Did you know what's coming? Did you kind of feel it a little bit? Like, did you
I
kind
was
of?
wondering where and when we were going to go. It was.
How long has it been? Would you say?
I had just gotten there in. Graduated. I got there in like September of 2012. Right. So we got orders to go in like November in 2012. So we got those orders. And
That must be a little kind of like, I don't know. I mean, unless you're kind of like, you're just in, but you're like, today's the day. Like either I'm the type of person, like if I have a flight, I want to be at the airport. Like I don't care when my flight is. I want to be the first one there, first flight out. Is that like, I would be like, let's just go. Come on. I want to head over.
It doesn't happen as quick as you'd think because we got orders because they had come back from Iraq. And then the next deployment was Afghanistan. When I first got to Black Hawk Troop in 4-9, I was in 2nd Platoon, which was at that time called Night Stalkers.
Okay, so are you in Afghanistan right now?
No,
you're not. Okay.
So I'm still in Texas, right? So when I first got there, I was, in Night Stalkers Platoon. Those guys were the Iraq crew, right? They were all getting out or they were PCSing, which means moving to different bases and different units. And everybody was moving around. And then we got orders to Afghanistan. And we found out that we were going to leave the following year because we had different training that we needed to do in order to get ready for that upcoming deployment.
Gotcha.
And we also found out that we were going attached to 10th Mountain. So
Which is what?
10th Mountain Brigade.
Okay.
Yeah. So or 10th Mountain Division. Yeah, they're division. Yeah. So they're based up in Fort Drum, New York. And they have one brigade down in Fort Polk, Louisiana, where JRTC, which is your train up area, you have NTC out in the desert in Cali, and then that's Fort Irwin, then you have Fort Polk, Louisiana. You ever see the movie Tigerland?
No.
So that's
Ed's a big movie, a producer. No.
Colin Farrell. It's an older 90s movie. It's about guys getting ready to go to Vietnam. That's where they get sent is Tigerland. And it's like one of the best recreations of like a jungle atmosphere you can get. And let me tell you, South Louisiana, it's not fun.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I remember the first time I went to Fenway Park.
Yeah.
All right. You're going to be like, what does this have to do with anything? The first time I went to Fenway Park, I was like 9 years old, I think, 8 or 9. And you know what? And I just remember walking out. We're on like the first base side, so we come out. It's very, and boom, there's the green monster. There's the home plate. You know what my first thought was? And this place is actually kind of small. Like that's what I thought. Like because you see it on TV, and it's like, it's like huge, and then you kind of step on. Like that's it. Like I feel like I could hit. I'm like 9 years old. I feel like I can hit a home run that far over the green monster. When you landed in Afghanistan, what do you remember? Like that first, like, man, it's hot. Oh wow, it's a weird smell. Oh, I hear this noise. What is that noise?
So I'll start from square one with this. When I got the call, all right. So we're prepping. I'm back from pre-deployment leave, right? We were allotted to leave at the end of July. I'm in my barracks room, right? And we had been getting everything together into a storage unit, like a bunch of us. And, I was, getting things ready to go. We were cleaning everything out to clear our barracks room so that we could leave, right? I had my bedspread, my TV, like a few sets of sneakers, and boots in there pretty much. A couple of sets of civvies too, civilian clothes. I was in the bathroom on the toilet. And I was getting these text messages, call me right away. And it was from a couple of the first lines. So, section leader and team leader. Team leader was letting us know, hey, call me right away, thinking it's an emergency. He's like, I want you guys to be able to react, right? About two or three iterations of this later, I get a phone call from him. I'm like, Sergeant Anderson, what's up, man? Is this another? He goes, no, dude, I'm sorry to do this to you, but you are going now. You have 10 minutes. You need to get your uniform on, your go bag, and you need to get the troop now. And I was like, what? He goes, you're going to Afghanistan. We'll see you over there. And I was like, oh, shit. And he goes, oh, don't forget. I'm like, what? He goes, make sure you turn in your room key to Sergeant Coronado. I was like, oh, God, come on.
It's like, by the way, make sure you check out at the hotel.
Like, all right,
and leave a review.
The moment like
yeah,
that.
right. There goes the movie. We won't put that in the movie.
My one Hollywood moment.
I know, right?
Right?
Yeah.
But no, so I jumped up, I put my uniform on, and I sprinted over to troop. And our troop was right across from where our buildings were. I think we were building like 31,010 or something like that. I can't believe I remember that. But we were over there, and I sprinted across, and Top Nahara, First Sergeant Nahara, was there with a bunch of rucks in the bed of his truck. And our first sergeant was like personally taking his guys' gear that he was getting notified they were going. Because he had a selection process too. It's like, who's he trust to send XYZ? Well, you're the dismounted machine gunner for Chaos Platoon, and we rolled light, man. I mean, we got rid of our track vehicles because you're not taking a track vehicle up a mountain. Not in our retrospect. So, I got my stuff together. He goes, good luck, Olin. We'll see you over there. It's like, okay. So between when I got that phone call and when I was on a plane overseas, it was an hour. So we're on the plane overseas, and we touched down in Manas, which is in Kyrgyzstan, right? So Kyrgyzstan, something like that, but it's a long one. It's Manas, and it's an Air Force held compound that's there, and it's for deploying and redeploying soldiers and military personnel. So when I get over there, I'm seeing all my guys from my one station unit training. I'm like, where are you going? They're like, oh, dude, we're going to Helmand, or we're going to RC East. Where are you going? I'm like, oh, we're going to Nangarhar, dude. We're going out in Jalalabad. He's like, oh, you're going to Jalalabad? I'm like, yeah, why?
Looking now, like, okay, so you were waiting, now you finally get there. Now you're going to figure out exactly where you're going. And are there places that rumors or what people talk about, it's like where places are going to be, I'm not going to say it's a good or bad place, because maybe some people want to see the action and that's considered a good place, but
yeah, I mean, that was our job was, in my mind, it was, we're getting sent. The way that we trained, we were going to be going and fighting in a hole in a mountain for 9 months. That's the way, we trained light. We trained with, the Max Pros and MATVs.
So why is there only 1%? Like, why do they want to keep that number so low?
To be completely honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head. But in my guess, it would be because you don't need a lot of people to do reconnaissance.
Okay.
Because you want to keep that element as small as possible and as versatile as possible. So those elements that are doing your reconnaissance and actually like your physical forward combat reconnaissance, you want those guys operating in small teams. Like an infantry company, those guys, 40 to 60 guys a platoon, 3 to 4 platoons in a company, right?
Right.
For us, when we left, we had 25 to 30 guys in 2 line platoons, first platoon and our platoon. In a blue platoon, that was our mortar section. So we had mortarmen with us, but there was just one section of them. And then our supply guy and a couple mechanics, from Delta, were up there with us too.
Explain what mortarmen are.
Mortars. So pretty much like if you see a movie where they have the mortar tube and they have that in the ground, and you have like an 81 or a 120 or something like that, they're the guys that are walking in, whether it be high explosive rounds, onto a target from a distance.
I can, it's so funny. I can hear the noise. How they drop it and then, yep, and boom, boom.
Yep. But they're very distinctive sounds when they're incoming, because we got hit with 107s, which are 107 millimeter Chinese rockets. That's what the Taliban like to use when we were over there. And with a mortar, you hear more of a whistle. A rocket, they come in hot. They're projectile.
Wouldn't you not want to whistle on that? I'm just curious. Wouldn't you want that to be quiet? It just says, it could just be physics, right? No matter what, when a bomb drops, that always makes a noise.
Because as a projectile, imagine a bullet, right? The firing pin hits the primer ignites the gunpowder and the grain pushes out the projectile, which is the round itself, and ejects the casing out of the chamber, right? So in retrospect, a recoilless rifle like an RPG or, say AT4, the Carl Gustav, those are being sent in a certain direction with a target in mind and an actual, target acquisition.
Gotcha.
When you're hitting a mortar, you are doing it as accurately as possible. I mean, our mortarmen were good, man. They were really good. They were a little bit whacked out, which is exactly what you want, but they were really good. And they could do the math because there's a lot of math to go with it too, because you need to read the angle, the pitch.
How many guys would be on one?
On one mortar tube, you could do it with a team of 2 or 3. But, depending on the size of the mortar that you're firing, 2 to 3 guys. But, you're doing the math and the angle and the pitch and the grade, and you are basically doing an equation to where you can walk around on to a target by lobbing it. That's what a mortar tube does, is basically lob, this projectile
How
into
far?
a target.
So you find out where you're going to go. What's the town you're in?
So I'm in Manas, Manas. So Manas is a little, hub. It's for deploying and redeploying soldiers, right?
But they tell you you're going where in Afghanistan?
So we found out that we're going to go to Bagram first.
And what's your first? Do you know anything about that? Do you have any clue?
All I know is that it's the biggest military base in the entire country. It's the Cush one that the Air Force has. It's got the McDonald's. It's got the Starbucks. It's got the Pizza Hut, which I never saw it. But
yeah,
I get there, and I got there at night, right? So we took a C-17 out.
What's the weather like? Do you remember the weather?
In Manas, it was, I think, 80s.
Because you were in Texas, so are you feeling like?
Well, it was in Texas in July, too.
Yeah.
So, Texas in July is dry. And I was in Central Texas. So, it's hot.
Okay.
But, you get over there to Manas, and it's, it's nice weather. It's like normal American weather that we'd feel in like the late spring, early summer. And then we get over to Afghanistan, and we landed in Bagram at night. Pitch dark. It had to be like 0 to maybe 1 in the morning. And we download all of our gear. So basically we make a big line and we're just tossing rucks back and forth to ourselves and getting them online, calling out names, going to grab our gear. And then they're like, all right, okay, getting this, it looks like a old school hangar, kind of like this. And just go grab a bunk and, get some rack time.
Can you sleep?
Like my heart's beating and everything.
Right.
But, I in my mind, I'm like, man, we got warthogs surrounding us. We got this and that. If I get hit with a round and I die before I even get to where we're supposed to go, I'm gonna be mad as hell.
All right. Not like this.
But we were there for like a few days, and we were just getting some knowledge and familiarization with the area that we were going to, which was Jalalabad. We're going to Forward Operating Base Fenty. And they also call it Jalalabad Airfield. It's hot, it's humid. You can't see anything out in the distance. Pitch black. Like imagine just that wall. And that's just what it was.
That's it.
And, we'd seen, pictures and film and YouTube videos and all this stuff and terrain maps preparing us for what essentially is just all mountains. Afghanistan is known for, fighting in the mountains, especially around the area that we went to. And I wake up, we get about 3 hours of rack time, wake up, it's hot and the sun is up and you can see the heat waves coming in from, the little hangar door thing. And I walked outside and I shit a brick. I looked, and my assistant gunner, Gerseni, we looked out, and these mountains were unreal. As it turned out, and I learned this when I was there, the mountains that surround Bagram, and a lot of mountains alike in the area in Afghanistan, are part of the Himalayas. Or not the Himalayas, but they were part of, back when they defeated like the Roman Empire kind of thing. It's like there are tunnels in these mountains that date hundreds of years or thousands back. And they still use those tunnel systems to fight, and even now. But it was just unreal. And we looked at each other like, we gotta walk up that? Like, what? Like, that, and we were like, dude,
It wasn't what you thought it was going to look like.
yeah.
Wait, was it just they were just bigger? They were just more.
Just en masse. It was like another culture shock kind of a deal. But I was just flabbergasted. Is the best way to describe it. And that's when it really hit home. I was like, I'm in the middle of a war zone. You know?
Yeah.
First deployment,
Yeah.
But I was excited too. I was also that typical 19, at this point I had just turned 21, right? In May, and I deployed in July. May 17th, I turned 21. July 15th, I deployed to Afghanistan. It was boom. So I, get over there and, we're all ripping, man. We're ready to fight. We want to do this, do that. And we didn't really, we had no clue what war was. We're new. This is our first experience with it, right? It's our first deployment. So, and it's 2013 as well. So, I mean, a lot of people forget that the initial war was Afghanistan,
Right.
in the 2000s. 2001 was the invasion and insertion in Afghanistan. 2003 was the invasion into Iraq. That was OEF is what I was, and that's Afghanistan. So I was like, all right, well, here we go. And then we did our familiarization, after, coming down off of that, a few days of familiarization, showing us what different IEDs looked like. S-vests were suicide vests, suicide bombers, what to look for, basically kind of compounding our training, refreshing us what we'd already learned of what to look for in identifying a vehicle-borne IED, which is, if the rear end of the trunk is dragging, if there are any wires hanging out anywhere, if there's a lot of weight towards the back, you're like, that doesn't look right. If they're riding like a donk in the South and it's because something heavy's in the back, you probably take some extra precaution.
What were the traits for someone who could have possibly be a suicide bomber? Like, was there like?
So these guys, we call them the man dresses, but they wore, the man dress looking stuff, the robes. So it would be a little bit harder to identify, when they're wearing that kind of gear. But we would look for anything bulky coming out of, their midsection area, anything that if it was sitting a certain way up on your shoulder straps, if you could tell that it was sitting and there was like a vest under it kind of thing. Almost the way that a police officer looks when they're wearing their vest underneath their duty uniform.
Right.
But their clothes are loose over there, so you would never know. But the way that they trained us, because we never encountered a suicide bomber ourselves, but we, had, this training to go off of, and, if they were like holding something that was under their robe, that was, a big sign too. I mean, the way they're acting, their mannerisms, did they have something around their face? Were they looking angry? Were they looking flustered? Were they looking scared? Were they nervous? There were different things that you had to read, and it was a little bit easier for us to do as reconnaissance because that's what we're trained to do, is observe and report and fight, But yeah, so, those kind of things, just like with the VBID, you'd look at, is the rear end of the car dragging? Is there anything hanging out? You look, and a lot of these guys, they had pressure plates, and one of the drills that we did, because I was a 50 cal gunner for the last 6 months of the deployment, was, you do your 05s and 0525s, right? So your zeros were gunner looks down and around to look for any disturbed dirt. Driver would do the same in a distance, because disturbed dirt could identify as, hey, a bomb's buried there. Or, something along those lines where, hey, maybe this is the trigger mechanism because a pressure plate, say you had two 2x4s, and then they had your electrical component up top, which when you went over it, the pressure pushed down, and that electrical connection sent through the wire engaged the explosive, and then the bomb blew up.
Right.
A lot of them were right around your, people walking around, they had them around their feet.
Would you say, I mean, they train you how to look for this stuff, whatever, but I mean, is it more often Like what percentage would you say, hey, like people have been able to point out a suicide bomber, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, there was a dismounted mission. They did find one,
Yeah.
and it was at night. They found a buried 107. Right. So they found this thing buried right around the outside of the perimeter of the forward operating base. And I was actually inside the fob. It was because I was the gunner for
What's
the
a fob?
forward operating base.
Okay.
So you have a combat outpost, a COP, which is a smaller contingent. A forward operating base is a bigger area of operation. So, that's where, for us, it was a smaller fob in comparison to Bagram, because Bagram was big, man. Basically, they called it Jalalabad Airfield because it was just an airstrip, and then you could turn and you could see the other side of the fob.
How was your first couple days, your first couple missions? What's going on?
So I found out that I was going over with only two other people. That was Sergeant Miles and Kenley. And they did it by basically kind of, fight log thing. And I had the saw, so they're like, we want to get him over there. Kenley went over there with me, and Sergeant Miles was the NCO that went over there. So we all piled up on a C-130, and rickety school bus with wings.
Yeah.
So in the one that we were on, so on the inside, you have imagine a metal bar that goes straight down the middle of the back of the plane. And then you have a metal bar that goes just like that makes seats, right? So it's just red cargo netting that you sit down on. And then on the other side, facing the same way towards the inside are the same kind of seats, right? Net. So we just jumped on there with all of our gear, and they flew our happy asses over to Jalalabad. And I remember our section leader, Sergeant Oakes, ramp dropped. We come out and we get into, the little entrance way thing there. And Sergeant Oakes is like, hey, boys, welcome to Jalalabad. And he had gone ahead weeks prior to basically do what's an initial setup and a side-by-side.
Now, is this the same situation, just like this place, and then it's all mountains, or are we starting out looking at
It's
civilian
a different
buildings?
kind. So where Bagram was, it was just sand and dirt, no vegetation, and then mountains all around the fob, right? Jalalabad was green, very green, because you had the Jalalabad River that went through it, completely different kind of heat. I will never forget how hot that was. I will never forget 130 degrees. I will never forget that in full kit, full battle. When that hit me in the face, I was like, nope, fuck this, send me back.
Nope. That was the heat that finally got to me.
And I was like, you got a hockey player and a New England boy in this?
Isn't this
Got
right?
your mind?
Right. Crazy.
It's just we were surrounded by mountains. We were basically in a big bowl, right? But JBAT had been there forever, right? Since the beginning, that's where the invasion, that's where they inserted in. So that's where U.S. Special Operations inserted in, was around the Jalalabad area. They came in from that area. So, with where we were operating out of, they had certain things over there that, I still can't say, but there were elements over there that, the spooky boys, Secret Squirrel, as we call them. But leading up to that, I got to do some really cool specialized training with SF, which was pretty cool. I got some special forces guys that I got to do the Carl Gustav range with. They taught that range, which was pretty cool. I was handpicked and selected to go to that. I got to go to a squadron handpicked long range marksmanship, which is basically a LSM, and designated squad marksman, DSM kind of a thing. But, we got to do that, which is pretty cool. Sergeant Vines, he was the platoon sergeant, first platoon. He was a sniper. So we got to go over there with the XM 2010, which is a sniper rifle, but he handpicked us from the platoons. He's like, I want that guy. We're going to bring them all out. And him and Top Mac, they ran this range. And it was out in, a 4-day long range in cold Texas, with a little hut. They would take us through barometric pressure, the grade in which you're shooting off of, your windage, your knottage, They would take us through the mathematical equations that you would need in order to calculate your distance versus drop rate, when the bullet drop, when the caliber that you're using, when it's going to hit its peak, that based on the distance that you're shooting, how differently the arc of the round dips dramatically towards the end or middle of its trajectory. There's a lot to do with it. And we were doing all this with just our M4s. We would do day shoots and night shoots. It was pretty cool. I got to do every range possible. 50 cal, I ripped on that, love that. I got to do Mark 19, got to do 240, but your scout weapons, qualified expert in all of them. The 203 grenade
I'm sorry.
launcher.
Really quick, before I forget, besides like what we're going to get into, why you left the military, besides that day, what's the most memorable day or thing that you remember your time there? It doesn't have to be anything big either. Like, it doesn't have to be anything to do with war.
I mean, I missed the smoke shack. It was this little shack. It was this little hut that was right next to our platoon command post. And our platoon command post was just a hut itself. We would go there to run sand tables and operation orders before we went out, training responses, stuff like that. Because what our job was over there was base defense for the most part. I mean, we'd go out on, dismounted patrols, then go on tower guard, and then, rotate back to, base defense. Sometimes we'd doing QRF, just quick response force, internal and external, but at the same time, but anytime we'd get hit, our platoon was responding. And every time we responded, we're ready to go.
So explain like what would happen for you to respond.
We'd be getting actively shot at.
Okay.
So 107s would come in. They have, basically a defense system in place where an alarm will go off, right? A lot of times it didn't. So next thing you know, you hear a boom, and then you hear spin it up, let's go. Spin it up for us meant go. It's our time. We're getting called. So, every time that happened, it was just another hope that we'd actually see some action out of that next, hit. But never did, because we had a flight line, and we didn't have any fixed wing, which meant no planes. We had no planes on that FOB at all. We only had rotor wing, which is helicopters. So we had Kiowas, which is little birds, they're reconnaissance. We had Blackhawks and Apaches. The Apaches would spin up. If they weren't already out already, they go, wipe them out, done. Then when you think of Afghanistan, you think of Kabul, you think of Jalalabad. But I mean, you're kind of out there. We were about 40 kilometers away from the Pakistani border, right on Highway 7. Highway 7 was one of the only main paved roads in the entire country that went all the way through, right? So where were all the Taliban going and coming from? Pakistanis. We don't have any of those guys here. We're the United Nations. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we'd get hit. We'd spin up. We'd go. When I was on the ground as a saw gunner, I would run to the 5 truck. The 5 truck at that point was a Max Pro, which is a bigger vehicle. It's an MRAP, but newer to us at that time. So ramp would drop. We'd get in, and we had jerry-rigged headsets, which meant that we could listen to music. And when we keyed out our mic to key out and communicate with anybody that was outside of our truck.
How long of a drive would it normally be?
I mean, we were going to basically battle positions that were within the FOB. So we would run different plays like, Texas or Alabama or, Chargers or something like that. And we would know from there which area we were supposed to go to.
Right.
So that would be from where the rounds were coming in, but then we would have to have backside as well, which meant that we would send the trucks out to other places on the FOB. So,
and how many times were you doing that? Like a couple times a day, a couple times a week, once a month?
There was one time we got spun up like 9, 10, 11 times a day, every day. Yeah. We were getting spun up for one reason or another. Either we were getting hit again, or we'd get hit and then we'd get a call up from BDOC, which is their central command of the FOB. BDOC would call to be like dispatch chaos. Like, okay, our platoon name is Chaos Platoon. So they'd dispatch us. We get a call over the radio to the platoon CP from BDOC, and it'd go a little bit something like Chaos Platoon, this is BDOC, BDOC, this is Chaos Platoon, go ahead. Chaos, spin it up, spin it up, spin it up. We're, Alpha, you're going to be running. We need you to run Yankee from this side, exposure, possible rounds to be incoming, stay, pretty much like that. To be like, okay, cool. So they'd respond in turn, Roger, acknowledged, we'll spin it up. They'd hit that radio down. They'd pick up the radio for the platoon. Platoon radio, you'd hear, and our NCOs would always have a radio on them if we were dispersed out through the FOB. Either because we were really only ever two places. It was the gym, the CP, or we were back at the bear, or at our hooches. So
what was your mindset from the beginning and I guess like right till the end? Like, did it change? Like,
it changed dramatically.
Were you scared less? Like,
we were so numb to it at that point. I mean, our sense of humor darkened to a point where, like, we'd hear the alarm go off. We'd look at each other. $5, it hits right before the flight line. All right, $10 says it goes 50 meters outside the wall this way. Hits like 100 meters that way. We're like, oh shit, okay, let's go. And then we would, go do our thing. But, I mean, just thinking about it now in retrospect, even BSing with my buddies about it, even now we think back and we're just like, dude, we were pretty fucked in the head. Like, we were young and didn't realize, like, now we see, now that we're older, in the lens of life, we look back and we see ourselves as these 19, 20, 21-year-old kids with a lot of responsibility put on their shoulders and with a purpose of something greater than themselves that raised their hands and said, I'm here, send me. And we did what we could with it. We did what we needed to do to not go crazy and get through the deployment. There were some really funny times too, man. I mean, there's a lot of really boring times. I mean, I'm nothing special. These instances I'm talking about, they did not happen every day, all day for 9 months straight. They didn't. We'd have times where it was, a lull. We'd go a month without getting hit. Everything's hunky-dory. Next thing you know, we get hit. Oh shit, here we go again. It's kind of, a little bit wild to think. Because, we got beefed up over there, man. We would go to the gym 2-3 times a day. Eat, sleep, gym, get hit, respond, repeat. Like that's.
Did you get to see the civilians or going to the city at all?
Oh yeah. I mean,
what was that like?
We didn't stay on the FOB the whole time, but I mean, the locals are, they're a little bit whack, man. They're one of two things. I mean, there was a dismounted mission that we went on, and the thing is that these kids are spoiled now over there. They got very Americanized, and we give them like candy and food and chocolate, and they're not scared of, anybody, which is, I think that's a good thing.
Right.
In retrospect, that's what we were there for, right?
Right.
We thought we were there for, and we get these kids that are comfortable coming up to us, but we don't know these kids. And they will strap a bomb to these kids without these kids knowing that it's a bomb, and they'll send them right up and detonate their own kid to kill as many American soldiers as possible. Crazy. They will do that.
Yeah.
And they do that.
How they train you to do, because, I mean, that's what I was thinking too, right? If a kid runs up to you.
Keep the fuck away from me.
Yeah.
We had one guy, we had this interpreter, Hollywood, and we called him Hollywood because he always wore aviators, and this dude was stoned out of his mind. Like every day. It was hysterical. But there was one, I was in, so we'd gone out, and I guess because I heard about it later, and these kids wouldn't leave us alone. They wouldn't leave the guys alone. And the interpreters, Hollywood, was telling me, get away from these dudes. Like, you got to keep away from these guys. These guys aren't here to play with you. All right, they're here to find the bad guy and kill the bad guy. And they wouldn't leave us. They wouldn't leave the guys alone, man. So in his just, hashish, blown out mind, he goes over and he grabs this reed and he's like swearing in Dari or Pashto, or whatever dialect he's speaking. And he's just under his breath, he grabs this big thick reed out of the ground, he snaps it and just starts beating the shit out of the kid with it to stay just right in front of everybody. We're just like, dude, you're drawing attention now.
Right.
But I mean, even the one that, one of the ones I was on, we go and there's this little mud hut in the middle of a field. It was like an irrigated agricultural field. I don't know what he was growing, but we're walking through and these kids wouldn't leave us alone. And of course, the kids not leaving us alone. This elder comes out. He's yelling at these kids to stay away. And he gets closer and closer, and these kids wouldn't leave us alone. They're basically like flipping him the bird and like disrespecting this elder. This elder picks up a rock and like discus throws this, just hucks it right at this kid's head. Barely misses him. The kids start running away. I was like, this place is wild.
Yeah.
The dogs over there, because right across from Tower 2, for towers were security that outlined the entire fob with intersecting fields of fire, which means that you could cross your fire and you could do it all over the forward operating base. That you have range cards there, and you can fill out these range cards to what you see, make sure everything's updated. But right across from us in Tower 2 is the one that we operated on, the night shift for me and DeBozy. They had a guy right across from Highway 7. Every morning at 06, he'd slaughter a cow. Every morning. Like it was clockwork. It was just his thing every morning. And that was this guy's life. He'd wake up and he'd slit the cow's throat. He'd wait for it to bleed out and fall over. And then he would string it up and he'd skin it, butcher it, and then he'd take all the insides and he'd walk across the street towards us. And there was a big ditch that was dug around, to keep it separate from Highway 7. And this little walkway before you got to like the big dirt, bridge the gaps that our vehicles could go in and out, and troops could go in and out on that side. And he would dump the innards in there. And then these packs of wild dogs would come up and they'd just be like coming out of the ditch and like licking the innards off of the ground. And that was just there every morning. He's like, oh, the dogs are out again. He's just,
and that was it.
Watching it.
So you felt good, like when you say walk in the city and you had the kid, like you felt okay?
We never had to walk in the city. There was only one point where we ended up in the city, and that was because everything was kind of misdirected. But they kind of basically got lost in the city, and I had to come back around. But
that must have been a little terrifying, right? Like, I mean,
no, I wasn't out there with them.
Oh, you weren't there? Yeah.
No, I wasn't out there for that one. That was actually right around when I hurt my back.
All right, let's get into that. Let's talk about.
So
explain this day. What happened?
So basically, we were doing a layout, which means that we were taking accountability for weapons and stuff like that, and optics on our trucks was assigned to each. And we had found shotgun ammo, which was reported to who it needed to be reported to. That those people did not tell the platoon sergeants. The platoon sergeant didn't know. We all had shotguns as gunners, right? So. This is back when Fritzy was still there. Fritz was the 5 gunner, and he was the only Joe, like lower enlisted, that went to Iraq. That was still from the Iraq deployment. Everybody else had gotten out. But yeah, so he, we were, clearing all the weapons, make sure everything was good, and of course, we had just done a class. Like we just do these random classes on stuff that we already knew, but just to kill the time, how to clear the shotguns, Mossberg 500, right? Super easy to clear these weapons. It's a shotgun. It's dead simple. And one of the guys, I'm not going to say his name. His last name's the opposite of East, but he has a negligent discharge. He has an ND, which means he fired off a round. And instead of doing the right thing and clearing the rest of the weapon, scares the piss out of himself and throws it, and just lands on the ground. And then platoon sergeant gets mad. He comes over. He starts making us do made to fail stuff because he's still in the drill sergeant mode. Got to, got to fuck up the platoon, mass punishment. So I end up in a squat position with my saw out, and a saw with a 200 round drum in that, it's not light, right? It's 27.8 pounds, give or take, from what I remember. Could be wrong. Without that in there, 200 round drum. And that's 200 rounds of 5.56. So I've got my kit on that. Next thing you know, I just feel my back give out completely. I'm like, whoa. Like I just feel the sharp, like intense pain. And I just feel my left leg hit the ground. my back loses all control, and the left side of my body just started just to like seize up into itself. And I was like jerking around like that. And we started laughing afterwards, and we called it the Olin torque after that. But
Yeah.
But they told me to go back to my hooch room and, you know, sleep it off basically, because they needed me. And, you know, I was like, I got it, but, you know, this hurts, man. So I got a little bit of rest, but that's when they ended up in the city. So I wasn't even out there for that. They threw a guy that was like not 100% familiar as I was with the saw, and said, "All right, you're going now." But then I ended up on the 50.
What's that?
The 50 caliber.
Okay.
So Browning M250 cal. That's what I operated on the 5 truck, and I was on a military all-terrain vehicle, which is called a MATV for short. You have these big nets. If you've ever seen a military vehicle overseas, like in pictures and stuff, it's got that netting on the outside. Those little dots that are around it, those are actually pieces of metal. It's called an RPG cage. An RPG net will detonate a rocket-propelled grenade or a round from a recoilless rifle before it hits the hull of the vehicle. Right? It's to, you know, be a buffer. Yeah, and I was up in that turret for the rest of the time, you know, and but it was just interesting, man. You know, you meet so many people, and I know that we don't have, you know, a lot of time, and we could, you know, talk more about it another time, but there's just so much that went on over there and so many different aspects. But I will leave you with this story about the end of Afghanistan, though. I found out that my grandfather, he lived with us, for a long time. We had the in-law apartment on the side of the house that we had grown up, and where we ended up settling in Cheshire. And I found out that he was in the hospital again, and he was not well. He had already had crippling arthritis, and it was he said that if I'm going to the hospital again, I'm not coming out, because it's like another bout with pneumonia. I was walking with Eno, and we had 2 weeks left until we were coming home. And I really wanted to see him before he left. But, Eno had this bag of laundry, and we were going to the laundry thing to have the locals throw it into dirty water to wash it.
That's
yeah,
nice.
it's lovely.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then we heard the alarm go off. We looked at each other, we just stood there. We were just so desensitized to it at this point. We're just like, all right, place your bets. And we saw it hit like right before the airfield itself, like the airstrip. And we were like, oh, that was pretty close. Should probably get to the truck line, huh? And he was the driver for the platoon sergeant, so he was the 4 truck driver. And at that point, we had this guy, he was this cat from 101st that was side-by-siding with us, which means he was doing a ride-along so that he could inform everybody of how we operated so that they knew how to operate over there. It was a pretty good hit by them. I mean, you know, I'm up in my turret, and we have these joysticks, and these things whip around. There's a lot of torque in it, but, you know, I got it down pat. I mean, I could list it off for you, man. I mean, I jumped in that truck, you know. Reiniger, my driver, Kyle Reiniger, he's a, you know, short little redhead. He would get, you know, I knew how to do the radios, but so did he. He'd get comms up, I'd get gun up, I'd get radio check, be good to go. Could get it done in under 90 seconds from just a flatline dry truck. So, you know, jump in. I have my 50 body on, because it's a 2-part system. Got my 50 body on my right shoulder, barrel on my left. Door, you know, I open the door, throw the body in first, then the barrel. I snake myself around because it's a 4-seater with a gunner stand in the middle. Snake myself around and up. I pop the hatch. I get up. Mark 90 mount with the bird cage goes in. Body of the 50 cal goes on. Slap with your pins through the mounting holes. You take the 50 cal barrel. You put it up and in. What you do, you pull the charging handle back. You have a little hole right there on the side. You see that square come into that hole. That's when you can start screwing the barrel back in. You screw the barrel all the way in, you come back 2 clicks. That was my best rapid fire rate of fire that I could get. out of that 50 and function well with it. And then after that, I would do my headspace and timing gauge, which is doing the headspace for the weapon and the timing so that when you, you know your rate of fire. And when you hit the butterfly, you know where it is going to actually squeeze the trigger and let loose. After that, I would get my headset on. I would put everything else on, throw my headset on, on top. I would call back to the platoon CP, say 5 trucks up, be ready to roll. And at that point, we're still waiting on everybody to get to the truck line. So I see Eno down there, and we just start screaming random shit at each other. And I was like, I don't know what to do with my hands. And he's just going, I need an adult. And I put both my feet up like this on the turret, and I just hit I hit the remote as hard as I could. And I just started spinning, and I'm going, I need an adult. I don't know what to do with my hands. And our truck, I could see our TC starting running up, so I stopped. I was like,
Nothing's going on. Yeah.
But, and then I saw, get in the truck. Platoon sergeant gets in the truck. And then the guy doing the left seat, right seat from 101st gets in the truck. He gets in the back of the truck. Ramp comes up. We're ready to roll. I see ramp come down. I'm like, what the fuck? Eno had taken his laundry bag of dirty uniforms and socks and underwear in there with him, and it smelled so bad that Sergeant Vaughn, our platoon sergeant, made this poor guy, he was a sergeant from the 101st, get his dirty laundry bag, jump out of the back and throw it behind the mafia block behind the truck because he was not dealing with that smell.
Yeah.
And we hauled ass. And then we responded. We came back. We spun down. Got our weapons, everything situated. Got the truck situated. Got the truck locked up. And I get to call home. And there's a little USO hut. And, luckily we were able to call, whenever we got a chance to. And I called home, and my mom answered, and she was like, Poppy just passed away. We're all at the hospital. We got hit 10 minutes after he died. And it was one of the more intense ones that we had. But he died 10 minutes before we got hit for the last time before we left Afghanistan.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Is this the grandfather with the patch too? That wore the...
He was actually Air Force in Morocco. Neither of my grandfathers wore the first Cav patch, but my grandfather, Poppy, on my mom's side, he was in Morocco when he was in the Air Force. He enlisted when he was 18. They sent him to Morocco. He was a linesman, electrician over there. He never talked about it. I mean, that's so soon after World War II when they made their initial push through North Africa into Europe.
Yeah. Yep.
So he was like, that place was a shithole.
Yeah.
But Poppy was funny. I could feel, the weird thing was I could feel somebody almost like laughing because the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and it hadn't done that since like the first month that I was, getting used to, this is what it's like to actually be rocketed. There's an actual explosive coming our way. This is how we're responding to it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. Kind of felt like somebody was sitting like on the turret behind me laughing. And that's just kind of what it felt like. It felt like an upbeat thing. And that was my pop 100%.
Yeah.
Because he was such a sarcastic, funny guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when he wanted to be, man, he just really was. But that was the last time in Afghanistan, man. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that went on, but, I had also had a shoulder injury that I didn't really tell a lot of people about. And, I made it through the deployment with the bum back. My shoulder hurt a lot. I remember coming home, and we got stuck in Romania at the Marine Corps hub there on the way back. And
the
of
last
course,
place, right? Like, quick pit stop,
yeah,
Romania.
Well, you got to transition back. So they bring you back, and they see us getting off. And these are hard up Marines, They see us get off the plane, and we don't have any like really clean uniforms. They say, here, keep this one uniform. Keep that one uniform so it's your clean uniform to come home and
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it really as clean as everything else?
Yeah. When they were washing it in that dirt water,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
But no, we got over there, and we would get in the gym, and we were just 21 a yoked. I was 247 pounds at a 19-inch neck, a 35-inch waist, and I was running a 12:45 2-mile. Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was bench pressing over 400 pounds.
Crazy.
With my arm length. You know, I was deadlifting over, 400 pounds. That's a long way to come up. But, you know, we were nuts. We were nuts, man, you know. But, you know, we finally got back home to Fort Hood March 4th, 2014. And I'll never forget it because my parents came down and surprised me because I told them, like, I'm coming home for post-deployment leave. You know, I don't worry about coming down to see me or anything like that. But they did.
They did. Yeah.
And it was funny because my dad, my mom thinking that, oh, it's Texas and it's March. It's going to be warm and hot. No. It is the opposite of all of that. It was cold and windy. And Texas is flat, dude. There's like, it's flat and bushes and like not the trees that we're used to here in Connecticut, man, in New England. But all I heard, because I wasn't expecting anyone to be there, right? So I see my buddy Colson come up to me, and Colson was on what was called rear detachment, and they stayed behind. Colson flipped the Bradley off a cliff. That's another story. That was a training exercise. Yeah, it's got another time, but to which I was one of the first ones to respond to with the platoon sergeant. But yeah. He was pointing, he's like, go over there. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, because, you know, we did our big march across the first Cav parade field and everything. My dad's like, I get goosebumps every time I think about it. Just seeing the force of the United States Army. And I'm like, my son is a badass. I'm like, I'm just a goofball, bro. You don't even know.
Yeah, right.
I'm a goofball. It's a good shot. But and I just heard Colby Olin, and I was like, that's my dad. I looked over, there they are holding the sign, Specialist Olin.
Wow.
And that was pretty incredible. You know, I got there, I still got a picture, and it's like 3:00 in the morning. My poor mom was freezing. They got down there with only summer clothes thinking it was going to be warm. And my dad goes, I kid you not, we went to Bass Pro Shop and we bought all winter stuff and we UPS next day air shipped all of our summer stuff back home.
Oh my God. How funny is that?
It was so funny. But we were able to go out and, you know, have a good time and brought them the Pluckers. Anybody watching that's at Fort Cavazos or, you know, the Hood, Fort Hood, if Pluckers is still there, man, the Batman, if they're still serving the Batman drink, I think I'll get you toasty.
So this was the first time seeing your parents in how long?
Almost a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost a year. But yeah, that was it was another kind of separation though, because like at that point I was at war, you know, and they took the whole, you know, no news is good news thing as a good thing. And, you know, I finally got back home. They're like, finally, he's safe. But, you know, coming up to that, you know, we started to do our reintegration process. We went on post-deployment leave. We didn't come back the same. Obviously, you never do. But we tried to keep the best parts of ourselves with, you know, I had a core group of guys that we went over to my buddy Eno's place, and we didn't go out and party anymore. We went to Eno's to party. Why? Because we were nerds. We would get shithouse drunk. I would grill food, and we would watch Mystery Science Theater 3000. I kid you not. That was it.
Yeah.
Like, we would just be the goofiest dudes.
Yeah.
And it was just dudes being bros, man.
Yeah.
It was great to have that camaraderie. It just didn't have to be this, like, hard up, look how big my dick is military shit every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we had that bond that it was just like 5, 6, 7 of us that were just there. And it's the same guys that are coming out for the wedding.
So when were you back home?
I got out March. Well, my out date, because I got medically retired for my shoulder. So instead of basically my shoulder fell out of the socket, and this one is all jumbly all the time because of this. Never got surgery for it. One day I just felt weird, and it had been hurting up until this point, but I just felt it give out in a way where everything went numb, and I just felt something move the wrong way, and it slipped and fell, and it just stayed that way. And I remember running up to our doc. I was like, Randy, bro. And he's like, oh, what the hell, dude?
Yeah,
and Randy, big, jack, black dude, like one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in your entire life. Very positive guy, very positive guy. Randy, if you're out there, I miss you. Team Jesus. I wasn't part of Team Jesus, but I missed your goofy butt. But yeah, so he brought me up and they took me to the Darnell Medical Center, and they basically put my shoulder back in, tied me up to what looked like a belt to a bathrobe, and gave me a horse pill of codeine and said, go away. But I ended up getting medically retired for that. So because I had a partially severed long thoracic nerve, which affected the other nerves on my left side, I had instability, and like they just, I was a specialist, and I was, they wanted me to get, fast track into sergeant and get my 5. And I really wanted to, a lot of us are just miserable at Hood, dude. Hood is just not a good place to be. It's like higher up leadership. But you see those stories, man. Like, oh, that girl was chopped up, put into a suitcase and shoved into a trunk. Yeah, dude. Like that's what, like when I was down at Fort Hood, like there was another active shooter when I was on post-deployment leave. There's just, unfortunately a kid from my squadron died on post, crashed his car. And I heard about all this. I wasn't there for everything, but I heard about this because this was my transition on the way out. And they harassed his family, declared him AWOL within 24 hours. You're supposed to wait 48 by military doctrine and UCMJ. They didn't find him for a month, and they were just like harassing his family with like the FBI investigators and stuff like that. And it was an infantry company doing a run on a tank trail. And it was an NCO that looked over and saw his Mustang on its side, and he ran over, and this poor kid had atrophied to 60 pounds. Right? You remember that guy that jumped the fence to the White House in 2011?
Yep.
Was from my troop.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's that.
So you're out. You're back to the real world. How's it going?
I mean, not great. I went to Quinnipiac for less than a semester when I got out. When I initially got out, I tried to rehab the best I could with my shoulder. I had to work one way or another. I was out, going to the bars with my buddies. I'm 22, 23 years old at this point, and like, just trying to enjoy life, a life that was outside of the military, with not really a sense of direction. But at that point, I had ideas and wants for what I could think that I could want to do, So I went back to Quinnipiac, and I didn't even make it the rest of the semester. I just didn't,
What was it? What happened?
I lost interest.
Yeah.
And I was not in a good place mentally. I was living by myself in North Haven. And I was drinking way too much. That's the start of the battle of my drinking with my inner demons was there.
Yeah. And would you say that is mostly just from what happened there? You don't have to go, like I said, I never want anyone to go to a part where they don't feel comfortable. Would you say it's more from some stuff in overseas, or just like?
I think it was a mixture of everything. But I had like some serious, readjustment issues because everything was cut short so quickly that they're like, people need to understand something about this. The U.S. government invests like over $100,000 per person to just go through your basic training. Back when I went through, they for 18 and a half weeks, that's more than 4 months. They train you and break you down and build you into this machine that they need you to be. And then when you get out, there's no real reintegration process anymore. There's not. Have they been better about it like in the recent years? I couldn't tell you. But for the amount that you go through and the intensity, and if it's a short amount of time, a lot of short timers like myself have a harder time readjusting.
Because you don't feel like
I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. I felt like I was abandoned by my purpose. And I was depressed, man. Like I just really didn't know what direction. I was like, if I not good enough to be in the Army, like what else can I do?
Right.
If the Army is saying like you're like, thanks for your deployment and the sacrifices that you've made, but you're not worth much.
Your intentions were to go back? Is that what you wanted to do, or?
That's what I wanted to do. Yeah, for a while I was looking into contracting jobs, like anything that I could do to get back over to a war zone, which is just like stupid.
Why is that, do you think?
I miss the intensity. I also didn't get to do my job over there, which is another big thing. You know, there was always, you know, that thing in the back of your head is like, my job is to fight, and I never got to fight. Yeah, and you know, the biggest thing for me was, you know, trying to find my purpose. You know, I ended up going back to welding school at Lincoln Tech, and I did very well there, and really because it was structured differently, and it was like work. You know, for me, a college is a waste of time. You know, no disrespect to anybody that goes to college or feel that's the best route to do for them, but to be completely honest with you, I don't want to waste my time with classes that I'm not going to do anything with.
Unless you're going to become a doctor.
Exactly. A doctor, a lawyer, you know, something like that. You need that length of time for the education. But if you're telling me that I am about to be, like, I'm going in for aeronautical engineering and I have to sit in this dude's fucking English class or freshman seminar at 23 years old, being a veteran of Afghanistan, you're out your damn mind if I'm going to sit through that and you expect me to respect your authoritarianism or what you try to control my brain to think? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know, for me personally, I never wanted to waste my time finding what I wanted to do. And if that meant, you know, when people look at my resume, they're like, Jesus, dude, like, you can't stay one place for one. I'm like, no, look at my resume, right? I went to welding school, immediately went to aerospace. I was a TIG welder for Doncasters, right? I was a blue card X-ray welder, which meant that I did all these major repairs on turbine castings and very intricately before they went to an X-ray machine again, which then it would be, if it cleared, it'd go to machining, it'd go to testing, like it'd go through all this different stuff. But, you know, I was on third shift and I was making $18.50 an hour. You know, I was making more money going to school on the GI Bill and working part-time at a hardware store than I was full-time at that place on third shift. You know, and I was just like, you know, whatever, dude. You know, I ended up putting my application out there and ending up at Hisco Pump. Now, here's the thing. I was drinking a lot still. Not in such a negative headspace, but at that point, drinking for me was enjoyment, and I didn't want to risk smoking weed because for the kind of work that I was doing, you always had to take a drug test. Back then, marijuana was not legalized, you know, or even decriminalized. Yeah. So this is, you know, late teens, like 2017 circa. And, you know, I ended up going to Hisco Pump. We were in the welding shop for a bit. You know, I just, you know, it was some cool work. I got to work with some really, you know, cool stuff. And, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do, you know? And then I ended up getting sought out by Pratt & Whitney UTC. This is back when UTC owned Pratt & Whitney. I went through the entire process. I passed the welding test. I passed the piss test. I passed all these other tests. I passed all the interviews. They hired me, right? Then what they do is they transfer you laterally to a staffing company to finish out your paperwork, right? These guys were Stafford staffing out of Texas, right? They botched my paperwork, and because I didn't get any notification. I had everything I needed, including like a benefits package, but no start date. And I was like, when am I supposed to show up? Right. You know, and I'm waiting. Finally, I get a piece of mail, and this is from Pratt & Whitney saying you're no longer eligible to reapply for this job. I'm like, what? So they botched that real bad, and I ended up jobless at that point.
Was that kind of the breaking point? Was that what kind of pushed this thing either?
That broke me so bad. I was like, dude, I had already put in my 2 weeks at my job. They told me to expect a start date within the next week. I was going to take that week and just kind of relax, get ready for my new job. I never got a start date, and that happened. Then I was just in a really bad state of depression at that point. I was just like locked in my apartment, just going out to either, you know, grab food or booze. That was it. And then I get a tap from a guy that I served with, Mason, and he goes, "Hey man, do you want to be on the road with us?" And I asked, because I put out there, you know, "Are you looking for a welder?" I didn't even know what he did. You know, turns out mobile drilling. And again, you know, we went out and, you know, we did a lot of these jobs all across the country, pulling pipe, pushing rod. I fixed everything that they broke, but I got to learn how to do viscosity testing, mud mixing, run all this heavy equipment, excavating, troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is one big thing I've always done throughout my life. and been able to do in problem solving as well. So I got to apply that a lot there. Ended up not working out, and my body was just hurting. I was heavily drinking, and I just needed a change. I wasn't even in contact with my parents at that point because I was drinking so much. I was not a good dude. I had changed completely. Like I had gone down a slope that was not good.
And you just felt, and really just because you felt like everything was failing, like what you did, and it just like, what else?
It's like I couldn't find that thing that could make me feel that empty space that's still there. There's something there. It's still not there yet. I'm still trying to find it. But you know what? Here's the thing, man. I always thought it was not okay to feel that way. I thought that it was something that you could force yourself into. Now I understand why I went through all that. It's because it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
It's okay to try different things. It's okay to live your life. And instead of going to school and work the next 50 years at the same place, being miserable after the first 20, to settle your life in that, dude. That's not living.
Yeah.
That's just surviving. That's not being alive. You know, for me, I look at my resume now and I go, I've done some cool shit, dude. I really have. I'm worth this 6-figure salary that I'm applying to. I'm worth this. I'm worth that. And this is another shout out to all employers out there too. Be more open to train to hire. You're going to cut down on your expenses and you are going to have much better retention rate. Because a lot of these kids, you go on Indeed right now, you're going to see a lot of these jobs out there. They're offering to pay people $23 to $25 an hour, and then you click on that job because they're just like, okay, you know, I need something. $23 to $25 isn't horrible right now. I just need something that's better than what I have right now, and they're requiring a master's degree. And I'm just, you're out of your mind if you think you're going to get that, you know. But now I've got opportunities coming my way. You know, after backtracking a little bit, I'm not in contact with my family. I end up moving in with, I get, you know, on the road, I get evicted from this apartment, right, that I'm living in. I was never even notified until I got a call from the marshal. Like, hey, we're at your door. We're taking your shit. Where do you want your military uniform? I'm like, are you kidding me? And it turns out I had missed that 1 month's payment because it didn't cycle all the way through from when I got paid to when they took the money out. And I ended up just stranded. And, you know, I ended up moving in with my buddy Brian and his girlfriend. And Brian's in his 50s. He was my assistant manager at Ace Hardware, where I went back to at least, because I was like, dude, swallow your pride and get back on your feet.
You gotta make money.
Yeah. So I picked up myself by my bootstraps with nobody around me to help at that point in my life. And Brian took me in. I got back on track to a point where Soldier Solutions started popping up in front of that Ace Hardware. I ended up going there and getting recruited there. And I ended up on the road for them for 3 years. Traveling the country, doing all sorts of events. I've been to anywhere. You draw a line from Eastern Texas all the way up to Wisconsin and the border of Canada. I've done them. It was a crazy experience, but it was also a big defining experience in my life too, because I ended up in a coma. Because a lot of those events, that's all you do is party and drink with everybody else that's there. That's how you make your sales.
Right.
You know, you get in go with the bikers that are on Daytona Beach. You're slamming Twisted Teas all day because that's who sponsors.
People buying you drinks and
yeah, dude, I turned like orange. It was ridiculous. And
so it was just like, it didn't matter what happened. It's like, I need to drink and that's it.
I mean, I would go through spurts where I wouldn't drink at all. You know, it was really situationally dependent, but then I started to have bad flashbacks that started coming out of nowhere. And I'm like, why? You know, fireworks that didn't used to bother me before bothered me now. You know, now I'm overthinking. I've got anxieties for different reasons that are reflecting service, but you know, I'm in my head going, I never experienced anything that was so intense that I think it's crazy. But, you know, I would get myself into these downward spirals where I was suicidal at a couple times, man. Like I've had a gun to my head, you know, I've had that. But I can thankfully say not for a long time, not for a long time.
Was there something that kind of kept you, that always kind of brought you back? Like, kind of like, this is not going to happen. You believed in yourself, right? Yeah. Or something
there was something always tugging back at me, you know, keeping it out. And, it was the fact that you're not done yet. It was my stubbornness, really. It was my stubbornness. It was me talking to me going, don't you dare. Don't you dare. And that's how, you know, I ended up not, I'm still here. I haven't had a thought like this in, what is it, 2024? Probably 5 years.
Colby, no, you never know how many people you talk. That's not a question you ask. Like, hey, have you ever had this thought? You never know. I mean, you could talk to, like 10 people a day, and maybe, you never know.
like,
You'd be surprised. I think that's a question you never ask someone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Ever. Like, hey, have you ever had this thought? But you never know, man.
You never know. And, when I started drinking heavily, it was like a bunch of really crazy stuff happened at work. I'm not going to get into, but there was a lot of, stuff going on. And at that point, I was by myself working an event in Florida, and I was just, going through a bad spot in my life, man. I was just like, even at home, I was all over the place. My body hurt, my brain hurt. I was exhausted, and it just kept me on the road and kept me on the road, and I wasn't getting a break. And I was drinking too much. And at this point, I was living with my buddy, the one person in this world that knows everything about me, Jesse. And he's a Marine Corps vet. And he asked me if I wanted to move in with him. He's like, I got this house in Wallingford, and I'm paying the mortgage myself, and it's 3 bedrooms. You want to move in? Yeah, absolutely. So I did. But he comes up to me one night, and he goes, dude, you're coughing. You don't look good, man. Let me bring you to the doctor. Nah, man, I'm fine. 20 minutes later, no, I'm not fine. So he brings me to the doctor. He brings me to Midstate. I walk in on my own 2 feet. I fill out the paperwork myself, and then I lay down on the gurney. I'm yellow. I was completely jaundiced. I was in stage 4 liver and kidney failure and breathing at a 30% lung capacity with double pneumonia.
Crazy.
I ended up in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. And I had tubes coming out of me that when I woke up, I was in so much pain. I never want to experience that again. And then I ended up sending myself to rehab in Florida. And it was this thing that I had to do for myself. It wasn't even required. It wasn't court ordered, nothing. I did it for me because I had to detach my head.
All right. So let's dissect into that, because you don't hear those stories too often, that it's kind of like, I got to do this now. Mm-hmm. So like, what was the turning factor? Like, why didn't you do that? When you found out, you got this new job and you're traveling, like why? I know you went through that, but
because I almost died. And it was also my family factor too. I almost died in front of my family. My parents were there with the doctors going over my, power of attorney, and basically saying like, we don't know if he's going to wake up. I was doing it for them initially, but I put myself in there too, because I had been told by my family that I needed to put myself first sometimes, and that it was okay and not selfish to do that. And I went through 2 weeks of just not talking to anybody, doing these classes just because I had to, kind of a thing, going through the motions. And then one day a fire alarm went off, and I just broke down. I broke down. There was not even a fire drill meant for that day. And I ended up going in and talking with a psychologist and just losing my shit. And I'm not a crier. Like I don't, but there's certain times I let loose. And especially not in front of people. And she was a very, very big catalyst in me understanding that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to put yourself first, because you need to do this for yourself. And in my mind at that point, I came out of there as, you are no good to anybody unless you can help yourself. Who are you supposed to help if you can't help yourself?
Right.
So that's when I put myself first. And soon after that, I met Julia.
Yeah.
And I was still on the road, recovering. And I just, I go and I'll grab her a bottle of wine on the way home, not have a single want or need for alcohol. I will DD for anybody.
How was rehab tough for you?
No, I mean, it was just tough in the matter of me facing myself and my demons and my mistakes.
Yep.
And that I had no choice but to own up to them. There was no excuses anymore. It was a grown-up thing. I think my brain was developing to a point where it's just a realization of, hey, suck it up, dude. Look at yourself in the mirror. Take accountability. Accountability is a big thing. And I can't ask anybody else to be accountable to themselves if I can't be accountable to myself too.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I was not doing the BS anymore. I just was not.
Yep.
So I came out of that. I came back. I had a lot of pain, a lot of weight to lose. I was all water weight. My bilirubin levels were through the roof. I mean, I think that my eyes were still yellow well into Julie and I dating for a little bit.
So we're going to definitely have another episode. We're going to indulge in this a little bit more, because I think There's this guy that was drafted by the Chargers. His name was Ryan Leaf. You ever heard of Ryan Leaf? He was a quarterback. It was between him and Peyton Manning. And I was a kid. Ryan Leaf. This is awesome. I got all his stuff. He was supposed to be, take the Chargers to the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. He ended up having like a huge drug addiction. He went to the Cowboys and he told stories about going to open houses and looking for prescription drugs and all that. And I would see the articles of all this, and the same thing kind of happened to him. He was in a jail cell and he hit rock bottom. And all of a sudden, like now you see him, I don't know how many years later, now he's been sober. He does what everyone else does. He does the Rich Eisen show. Now I feel like he gets to talk sports and he gets to serve a bigger purpose. When players retire, they kind of go away. This guy's saying, I feel like that's kind of like how you are now, right? I think you're actually, what you have to do is and you're going to be getting married soon. It's just starting. I think the biggest purpose is now starting to show a little bit. So let's end it this way. If someone's in this situation that they can relate to you, like what would you want to tell them?
Remember the guy that raised his hand and said, "I am here, send me." Always remember that guy. If you are going through anything that is familiar to this, your rock bottom hasn't happened yet unless you actually started making a real change. I can't tell you what to do. I don't want to tell you what to do, but I'm here for you when you figure that out.
Beautiful. So you feel like you can only go so far, something like they have to want to meet you halfway.
My methods won't work for everybody, just like your methods won't work for everybody. You have to find your methods to your madness, because that's what I did for me. And now I'm sober. I don't go to AA. I don't need AA. I'm about to be married to a beautiful woman that I'm batting out of my league with. I'm going to be a stepdad. And even with, the work situation being as much of a bummer as it is right now, I'm still not giving up because I know there's something better out there. And I'm figuring that out by experiencing all these jobs. I'm gaining knowledge and experience through these different things that I am doing professionally in my life. That is the best education. So even if you need to separate yourself, take that, say you have $1,000 in your pocket. Take that $1,000, go somewhere, separate yourself. Separate yourself away from everybody. You should be just as important to yourself as somebody else is to you.
Well said, my brother. All right, Colby, thank you very much. Appreciate it, man.
Of course, man.
All right.
Yeah, until next time.
Till next time.
Yeah.